welcome to Preacher to Teacher. My name is Terry, and we are continuing our conversation with teachers and students about life in a classroom and how we might be able to learn from each other to make the space of our classroom a much better place for teachers, but more so for our students. So thanks for joining us. If you like this content, make sure you hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, turn the notification bell on. You all know the drill. And so you can make sure you get more of that content. Today, I'm honored to have Rob McCannell join us here on the channel. And he has been such an incredible asset to me. He has coached me and mentored me and helped me, in especially my first year, learn so much. I remember going out of my room on many occasions. Mr. McCannell, I face this. What do I do? And he was so kind and gracious. So thank you so much for agreeing to come on.
Happy to be here. Happy to help.
Awesome, man. So, like me, you did not start as an educator, but you've been at this a lot longer than I have. So what got you into education?
Well, I started out, I went to college for finance, and we determined pretty quickly that that was not for me, nor was I for it.
Sure.
I think I'd seen the movie Wall Street, and he had, nice shoes and a computer and all that. And in the 80s, I was very infatuated by that. But I fell in love with newspapers, and I did that for about a decade and a half. I did take a break from that in the late 90s. I worked in publishing, but worked in newsrooms in Tallahassee, Memphis, and in Dallas. I was in a newsroom on 9/11.
Wow.
And I had a succession of part-time jobs along the way because coming into education was actually a raise for me.
Oh, wow.
That tells how journalists are paid these days. But anyway, my part-time jobs, I bartended, I drove a tug at the airport, all kinds of things.
Oh, wow.
And I found myself in either official training roles or quasi-training roles at almost all these.
Mm-hmm.
And I had people in my ear from when I was very young telling me that I should grow up and become a teacher, including my mother. And, I, of course, resisted that for as long as I could.
Sure.
But, one thing about newspapers is a dying industry. And I realized about 9/11 is when I realized I was going to have to find something else. And, I started thinking about what kind of things I enjoyed and what kind of things I felt like I'd experienced success. And it, became a pretty natural fit after that. So I alternatively certified in 2006. I started my teaching career in Irving, Texas in 2007.
Okay.
And I came here to Hilliard in 2012.
Awesome. So what do you teach?
I teach, right now, this year I taught 8th grade science. I taught high school Earth Space Honors and high school U.S. History. And it's kind of it's a mixed bag. I actually went into teaching to teach history, but out in Texas, they pretty much saved the social studies jobs for football coaches. And at that point in our life, we were just starting a family. I had a 3-year-old at home. Coaching in Texas is a whole other ball of wax than it is here. It just wasn't something that I really wanted to do. So I ended up accepting a science position. I had a principal who, knew I was interested in social studies, but said, come talk to me. I want to get to know you a little better, and ended up talking to me and offering me science and selling me on it. And
Okay.
Of course, years later, I found myself doing that. And
All right.
It wasn't until COVID, 2020, when I got my social studies certification.
Okay.
I had some time and went ahead and did that. And, found myself teaching American government in an election year, which was always fun. Yeah. But realized I loved it. I really have enjoyed teaching U.S. history this year. That was almost, I don't want to say it was an end game, but that was a milestone for me in teaching, was getting into a high school history class.
Awesome.
I enjoyed it. I'm so looking forward to that next year. And I like the 8th grade science too. I mean, I don't want to sell science short. I've always been an earth space guy. I like rocks. I like space. I've built a career doing that as well, and I enjoy that.
Cool.
But
Awesome.
I'm really excited to be doing both.
Cool. Now, you've been in education 16 years. You've seen a
my
lot of
16th,
change.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what has changed in education? What used to be a part of education that went away that you wished would come back? What have we added that you think is a really good thing?
Well, one thing that we've gone away from that, we did this in Texas, and I know they did it in Florida as well, is that it used to be in science specifically, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade built on each other. You got a little bit of everything every year. And it's not like that anymore. 6th grade is mostly life science. The kids get body systems and cells and things like that, and then weather. Seventh grade is mostly genetics, ecology, the physical science, waves and light and stuff like that, plate tectonics, and then eighth grade is reserved for study of matter, which chemistry, matter, and then space. And I think we lost something when we went away from the giving them a little bit every year, just starting out with a 10,000-foot view of it in sixth grade, drilling down a little bit in each one in seventh, and then really getting specific with an eighth. Keeping the four strands of earth, physical life, and nature, but building on it year over year. I think that's something that I wish we would go back to. From a management administrative standpoint, honestly, I haven't really seen a lot of wholesale change. There's kind of jogs back and forth between hands-on administration, hands-off administration, and not talking about my administrators here specifically. I'm just talking about from an industry standpoint. How I perceive it to be, and I haven't really seen a lot of change in that. I don't think the kids have changed much either. They want to be listened to. They're teenagers. They have a kind of hypersensitive sense of fairness. That's the exact same as it was 16 years ago. I had a couple pieces of advice I got when I was first year teacher. One of them was that you had to model for kids every little thing you wanted them to do. And I had an older teacher when I was doing my alternative certification, had been teaching since the year that Kennedy was assassinated. So he was he was in his late 60s. And he told me, he said, you're going to have to show them how to throw things away, how to sharpen a pencil, how to walk through them. I said, man, they're like 13, 14 years old. These are mini adults. So of course, 3 hours into the school day, I've got this halo of trash from my trash can, and every time we're falling into desks and slapping the door, I was like, okay, yeah, that might have been right. But
so do you find that more with the middle school or the high school too?
More with the middle school. High schoolers really are a little more set and have their feet under them. Another thing that I was told was that with middle school kids specifically at that age group, that their brains aren't really fully formed yet. And I understand that. My brain didn't fully form until I was about 35. So, I mean, I get that. But the dendrites, the axons, the neurons, and the dendrites don't really fully connect. They start connecting when you're a late teen. But when you're 13 or 14 years old, they're proximal, but they're not connected fully. So they're firing incorrectly sometimes. Instead of these two connecting, these two will connect.
Okay.
So when a kid tells you, when you say, why did you do that? What were you thinking? Why'd you do that? And they say, I don't know. There's a good chance that's correct.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, and that hasn't changed. But, kids are basically the same. I mean, I think they're still generally empathetic. They want to be held to a standard. They're still distractible, and the distractions are different now, obviously. I mean, the iPhones came out the year I started teaching.
So you talked about the advice that you got as a new teacher. You had shared a lot of advice with me. What new teacher advice would you give today now that you have 16 years under your belt?
Well, I tell all the new teachers in my department this, that some things to watch for is that in education, the first reaction is almost always going to be an overreaction.
Okay.
Okay, so guard against that. Don't be the shiny new penny. Stay off the radar. Come in, do your job, and let your work speak for itself. More broad scale advice: pick your battles and take your ego out of it. Okay, It's not about you; it's about them. I don't feel like I have to blow kids away with rigor for my own ego. I'm more concerned with making it a good experience, and maybe getting them a little bit excited about the content at the same time.
Cool. So I'm not sure I stayed away from the shiny new penny advice, but
no, you did. You had your moments, but again, you're coming into education profession in which you are at the forefront, and leadership is something that is a little bit more assertive. And I mean, obviously, servant leadership is grassroots, but at the same time, where you came from a profession in which you have to be a face, and a face of a larger entity, and teaching isn't really that all the time.
Correct. Yeah. So, in the classroom, what would you say are some of the things that you do that are highly effective in getting students to interact with and remember the information that you're trying to teach them?
I look at my job in middle school as to prepare them for high school.
Okay.
I look at my job in high school as to prepare them for what is beyond. And these kids aren't all going to go to college. I understand that. I think we overemphasize college too same time, the vast majority of them are going to be in a situation in which they have to be educated to certify for something or a training program for a job or something like that. Very few of them are going to find themselves in careers in which they never have to do that. So they're going to have to learn how to handle things like that. And another thing that I want to do as well is help them recognize the fact that you're going to have to deal with yourself for the rest of your life. So establishing soft skills, a little bit of detail orientation, make them put their first and their last name on their paper. And a lot of them think that this is just me being picky and it's an overly pedantic thing that I do, but it's really not, because not only is it a tangible thing that makes my life easier when it comes time for me to alphabetize and put in my grade book, or I have my TA alphabetizing for me, or I've got 3 different Haleys in one class. I had that once. Things like that. But as well, it's training for life. Learning to sign your signature in pen. Your signature is always your first and last name. Little things like that they don't quite grasp sometimes. And then for retention, teaching them to interact with things in different ways. There's brain science behind the fact that you retain something 7 times better if you write it than if you hear it. Okay, and 3 times better than if you say it. So write it, say it, hear it. Make them work together. I prioritize games. I like vocabulary games and things like that, and make them do things beyond. I'm not a big fan of sit and read for 30 minutes. And that's good, because education's really gone away from that, as it should have. And these days, I find less and less straight reading, and more teaching them how to process it and pull the pertinent things out.
Okay, so in the culture and climate at Hilliard Middle Senior, I like our culture and climate among
I do as
teachers.
well.
You and I have had opportunity to have lots of conversations about things that might be divisive or argumentative, and you and I have not seen everything the same way.
Right.
But yet, you are a dear friend to me in the context of this school. How do you think teachers could do a better job at engaging in like civil discourse with other teachers with whom they might see things very differently?
Well, I don't think we have a huge problem with that at this school.
I agree.
I think we generally we've avoided having a cliquish staff like some schools have. I feel like even when our morale is not as good as it could be, it's still pretty decent comparatively.
Better than most.
Yeah, when I first got here, I couldn't relate to a lot of things that the teachers here were griping about, because having come from the environment that I came from to here, it was just a completely night and day experience. But I think the things that we're doing, I appreciate the fact we're doing grade level meetings, and we're not only getting together to talk about issues with specific students, issues with the calendar and things like that in that context, but we're meeting each other. We're meeting people outside of our department and outside of our own hallway, and developing relationships there. And I've learned that some of my fellow 8th grade teachers in math and some of the other subjects are hilarious. And I look forward to those things. I don't look forward to losing planning time, but I look forward to those meetings because some of these people are a hoot.
That's awesome.
And it's hard to even if we don't see eye to eye on everything, it's hard to be resentful of somebody if you're sitting and laughing and good-naturedly cutting up with them.
Agreed.
From time to time.
Agreed. I love it. I agree. I love the culture climate here. Do you see anything on the horizon that might present some challenges for teachers?
I do. I think our enrollment will decline a little bit. I know that
When you say our, you're talking about public education at large?
Public education at large. I think we might be insulated from that to a degree because there is a lot of growth coming to Nassau County and to Northwest Nassau County specifically, and that might insulate us from that a little bit. But charter schools are going to drive our enrollment down a little bit. Homeschooling is going to drive it down a little bit, and the push to frankly to privatize education, which we could have a whole other discussion about that. But that's an issue, and in Florida we have a class size amendment, which is something that other states don't have, that mandates how large classes can be before they have to hire a new teaching unit, or else schools and districts get fined. I we reconcile those things over time. That's a macro issue that, I have 8 more years before I retire, so I don't know how intense that's going to get over the next 8 years. So these are things that, I think are challenging. But at the end, I know what you want, I know what I want, and I like to think that, my colleagues, I want this too. I want to come in and do my job. I've got standards I want to teach within. I want to come in and do my job, teach within those standards, and make this a positive experience for the kids. Where the first rule is keep them in the boat. Don't be the reason that they don't want to be here.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Don't make that specifically you, and and then start dealing with. I know the district has imperatives, milestones we have to hit from a score standpoint and things like that. But the deeper meaning is that we make this a good experience for everybody to the greatest degree that we can.
Good. Yeah. I tell everybody before they come on the channel that they have an opportunity to ask me any question they want. I've gotten lots of different ones. Any question you would ask me?
How did your career aspirations change over time? Like, for example, when I was a little kid, I wanted to be a weatherman, and I think I saw the Weather Channel reporters and was infatuated with that, the guy on the beach when the storms coming in. Then I went to college for finance and realized that was a terrible idea, and then fell in love with newspapers, eventually ended up teaching. And what was your evolution? How did your career?
So I started with wanted to be an Air Force pilot, psychologist, and then I had a call to ministry, and I evolved in the ministry side of things fairly. I think the way to say that would be well. I was quote unquote given more responsibility or larger context, that kind of thing, and as I got older and experienced global contexts and what I discovered was that culture, those outside of the church, the things that were happening outside of the church were evolving at a pace that far exceeded the interest of those inside the church to change with it. And I'm not even talking about morality. I'm just talking about the way people communicate, the way people gather, the way that the things that people value,
the nuts and bolts of everyday life.
Yeah. And the church wanted to stay in its current paradigm, and so additionally there was growing. It might even be resentment in the community at large for how churches used money that was raised, and at the same time when it was more and more difficult to raise money in local churches because of increasing debt, decreasing, it used to be people were given 10%. I think now it's less than 3% on average. And so churches are having to have more people to get their bills paid, and there's less of that money because of how much things are costing to do business as a campus-based church. And so all of that began to trouble me, because it was, for me, less and less of a reflection of the New Testament. And so I had to ask myself the question, what did I want to give the rest of my life to? And did I want to give the rest of my life to that model, or did I want to give the rest of my life to a different model? And, here I am. So we know the answer to that question. And so we're in the process of planting micro-churches, which are just small churches that meet in homes.
Right.
And since there's no campus, 100% of what we raise gets to go to whatever in the community. So, we provide food here for students, and we feed students off campus that need food. And so most of what we raise is going to that. We provide laundry detergent for the folks who are in transitional housing situations,
right,
so that they can wash their clothes without having to worry about the detergents. And so we spend thousands on that every year. And so we can do things that, because we don't have property insurance or property or electric bills and all that stuff, nor do I get paid from the church side of things, we can do so much more. And so the ministry side has evolved from a place that's very campus focused to very community focused, and one that's very administrative focused to an ability that with a leadership that's very flat instead of hierarchical.
So taking the infrastructure out of it, you basically take yourself out of it.
That's correct.
Make it about the work.
That's correct. And so now I have two students who are being trained to do their own microchurch. One is already testing that microchurch at their own home. And so he's being trained, and within another year or so, I'd expect that he'll have his own microchurch. And he's very excited about, being empowered to baptize people at 19, 20 that come to faith as a part of that microchurch. And so it's really exciting when you begin to empower people with flat leadership structures, what people can accomplish. And so not every organizational system is able to do that, but in that whole process, I needed to come up with a job, right?
Yeah.
And so I struggled to figure out what that was, and it's a longer story than I probably have time here to share, but I saw a billboard on the way to Disney about teaching, and it was like an aha moment for me. Within weeks, I was hired by Mr. Crawford.
Right.
And here we are. The biggest frustration I had in the year was not knowing what God wanted me to do. The weirdest thing was working for Amazon, I was delivering in Hilliard all the time. And going to graduation parties at homes that you have delivered to is really weird, because then you realize, all that stuff that was happening back then, I wasn't wandering in the desert. I was wandering in the place that I was going to serve. And so it's neat to see how life, all things work together for the good. And so it's an interesting evolution in my own life.
We're put where we need to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So any other ponderings?
What's different about teaching when the day that John hired you?
Yeah.
What misconception did you have coming in that you now no longer have?
Oh yeah. So when I first thought about teaching, I'm thinking about teaching in the context of pastoral ministry, and so that's very teacher driven and very top driven, and so the teacher does the talking. And so as I began to do research and preparation for my interview, I keep hearing about differentiation and students being the ones to do talking, and I'm like, well, how in the world with a subject matter like history, how does a student who doesn't know about a historical situation talk about a situation they don't know and be the one teaching? I was like, that doesn't make any sense to me. And I now know that is exactly what needs to happen for success in a historical context. I just have to set the parameters so that they have the tools to teach each other, right? Yeah. And so now I know how to do that. I had no clue 2 years ago, and man, to see how effective that can be. To, like, in the one context, 1 week, 30 court cases, the kids get a 93 on the test, and they did the teaching. It's like, wow, I was blown away. And I've learned so much about effective teaching tools that when I look back in the church context, I'm like, man, I wish I'd have known this.
Yeah, apply it to other aspects.
Yeah. So, but yeah, cool. Well, Rob, thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate it so much. And like I say at the end of every video, I want you to remember that you matter, and what you do every day in the lives of your students matters. Hey, thanks for joining us, and I hope you have a great week.